President Lee Jae-myung has arrived in Chile for the second leg of his South America trip, where he'll meet with Chilean President José Antonio Kast to modernize the free trade agreement and expand cooperation on critical minerals and energy. The US military has resumed strikes on Iran 6 days after its last airstrikes, calling them a powerful response to Tehran's ballistic missile attack on American forces in Jordan, a move that has derailed diplomatic momentum. The US Federal Reserve has held interest rates steady for a fifth consecutive meeting, with Chair Kevin Walsh citing the economy's resilience and the need for more clarity on inflation, despite renewed pressure from Trump to cut rates. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. President Lee Jae-myung, who's on an overseas trip to the Americas, has landed in Santiago. He will sit down with his Chilean counterpart, José Antonio Kast, for talks on strengthening cooperation on a free trade agreement. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports from on the ground.
Having wrapped up his state visit to Brazil, President Lee Jae-myung has landed in Chile, the second leg of his three-nation trip to South America. Meeting the Korean community on Wednesday, President Lee highlighted Korea's ties with Chile.
양국 국민이 더 깊은 신뢰와 우정의 마음을 나누는 한-칠레 관계의 새로운 미래를 목격하고 있습니다. 핵심 강물, 청정에너지, 디지털과 인공지능, 과학기술과 문화에 이르기까지 양국 간의 협력의 지평은 점차 더 넓어지고 있습니다.
The next day, he will lay a wreath at the monument for Bernardo O'Higgins, honored as one of the nation's founding fathers. President Lee will go to the presidential palace on Thursday to meet with his Chilean counterpart, José Antonio Kast, who took office in March. The leaders will attend an official welcoming ceremony, expanded talks, an exchange of MOUs, a joint press conference, and lunch. Their key focus is modernizing the Korea-Chile Free Trade Agreement, which hasn't been updated since it went into effect in 2004 to reflect new areas, including digital trade and environmental cooperation.
We expect to dramatically increase trade with the South American countries and support our companies making inroads into the regional market.
South Korea also looks to expand cooperation in critical minerals, energy, and food. Chile is one of the major producers of copper and lithium.
We plan to strengthen our strategic partnership related to critical mineral supply chains and deepen discussions on diversifying sources of food and energy imports.
Also on the agenda is cooperation for the UN Ocean Conference set to be co-hosted in 2028 by South Korea and Chile. After concluding the summit, Lee will attend a Korea-Chile business roundtable. The South Korean president's trip to the key economic power in South America takes place as the country looks to expand its diplomatic horizons to the global south. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Santiago.
As President Lee seeks closer cooperation in critical minerals, technology and trade in Santiago, Chile's ambassador to Korea says the trip could take bilateral ties to a new level. Our Oh Si-young sat down with him.
A new big bang in Korea-Chile relations. That is the potential that Chile's top diplomat sees in President Lee Jae-myung's visit this week, from political to economic cooperation.
The free trade agreement was a big bang 22 years ago. I think we need to have a new big bang in the relationships, and I think the visit of the president of Korea next week to Chile will do that. No, will push the relationship between Chile and Korea to a next step, to a new level.
The deal helped raise bilateral trade from around $1.6 billion in 2004 to more than $7 billion last year. Chile is the world's largest copper producer and second largest lithium producer. Korea's strengths lie in advanced manufacturing, including batteries, electric vehicles, and semiconductors.
So want now to Korea also to participate in the lithium ecosystem, to add value to bring technologies into the exploration and exploitation of lithium and other critical minerals in Chile. So that's the big challenge for both countries. How do we jump from a buying-selling dynamic to something much bigger, much broader?
Lee's visit could provide political momentum for the next stage.
We are looking to new areas. We are looking about artificial intelligence, about cultural industries. We want also to have cooperation on infrastructure, critical minerals. So the business delegation that will come with President Yi to Chile exactly points to those areas. So we're looking forward to good discussions between governments and also between the business sectors of both countries.
The partnership also carries wider strategic significance for two trade-dependent middle powers facing rising protectionism. The two countries coordinate through platforms like the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation and the Digital Economy Partnership Agreement. Chile also supports Korea's bids to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership and become an associate member of the Pacific Alliance.
Chile and Korea have a long story of shared values regarding multilateral trade system, the importance of rules in trade, the importance of rule in multilateralism in general, the importance of regional cooperation, and we are working also very closely together to try to protect the multilateral system, and protectionism can only be fought with more open trade.
The ambassador hopes to see the relationship continue to expand outside official diplomacy.
So it's a good way to discuss how, in this new approach of the relationship between Chile and Korea, both countries should work together. And when I say countries, I mean governments, private sector, universities, and people.
Yi's two-day visit is the first by a Korean president since Park Geun-hye travelled to Chile in 2015. It will also be his first meeting with President Jose Antonio Kast, who took office in March. Seong, Arirang News.
The US military has launched strikes against Iran following an attempted Iranian missile attack on American forces in Jordan. US Central Command described the operation as a powerful response, launched just hours after President Donald Trump vowed to hit Iran very hard. Our Chung Hye-rim reports.
The U.S. military has launched a new round of strikes against Iran. U.S. Central Command announced that the operation began at 8 p.m. Wednesday Eastern Time, describing it as a powerful response to Iran's attempted attacks on American forces in the Middle East a day earlier. Explosions were heard in several locations across southern Iran. The strikes came after U.S. President Donald Trump vowed to hit Iran very hard, following Tehran's launch of ballistic missiles at American forces stationed in Jordan.
In the meantime, we're going to be hitting them very hard because it's our turn to hit them. They know it's coming.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said it had fired several ballistic missiles at a U.S. airbase and a military center in Jordan. The U.S. military described it as an attempted surprise attack, saying all incoming missiles were intercepted. Jordan's military also said it intercepted 5 missiles launched from Iran. Following a brief lull, the resumption of attacks from both sides has derailed diplomatic momentum, casting serious doubt on efforts to revive the ceasefire. Meanwhile, a suspected drone strike hit a U.S.-owned gas storage tanker at Egypt's Mediterranean port of Damietta. Maritime security firms said the attack struck the Energos Winter, sparking a fire that spread to another vessel. Egypt's petroleum ministry confirmed fires aboard 2 ships but did not identify the cause. It said the flames were brought under control and that no injuries or fatalities were reported. Responsibility for the suspected strike remains unclear. Chung Hye-rim, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in the U.S. Federal Reserve keeps interest rates unchanged for a 5th straight meeting, citing persistent inflation and uncertainty despite recent economic shocks. The decision comes as President Donald Trump renews pressure for lower borrowing costs, while Fed Chair Kevin Walsh says policymakers remain focused on restoring price stability. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has left interest rates unchanged for a 5th straight meeting, choosing to wait for more clarity on inflation and the broader economic outlook despite renewed pressure from President Donald Trump to cut borrowing costs. At the end of its 2-day Federal Open Market Committee meeting, the Fed voted 9-3 to keep its benchmark interest rate at a range of 3.5 to 3.75%. The decision leaves the interest rate gap between South Korea and the United States at as much as 1 percentage point.
Today, as you know, our committee decided to vote by a 9-3 vote to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 3.5% to 3.75%.
Speaking after the meeting, Fed Chair Kevin Warsh said the central bank remains firmly committed to its 2% inflation target, while describing the U.S. economy as showing impressive resilience despite recent shocks, including renewed fighting in the Iran war. Warsh acknowledged that inflation remains above the Fed's target and said policymakers will continue to monitor incoming data carefully.
Broadly, if you said to me standing in front of you, I abide fully by the strategy document, we're going to deliver 2% inflation and not a whisper more. But to achieve that, I'm looking at a broader set of inflation data than PCE.
Asked whether another rate hike would be the best response if inflation stays elevated, he said higher rates could be part of the solution, but stressed that any decision would be based on a broad assessment of economic conditions rather than inflation alone. The decision comes days after President Trump once again urged the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates, arguing that the United States should have the lowest interest rate in the world to support economic growth. When asked about the Fed's decision on Wednesday, Trump praised Warsh as fantastic, brilliant, and smart, while reiterating that he would still like to see lower interest rates in the months ahead. 이승재, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics on Thursday said its second quarter operating profit rose more than 1,800% from a year earlier to 89.5 trillion won, or approximately $62.1 billion. Sales increased 130% to 171.5 trillion won. Its chip division posted 127.5 trillion won in sales and 89.2 trillion won in operating profit. Record DRAM and NAND sales drove another record quarterly performance following the first quarter. Samsung said it expects earnings growth to continue in the second half as semiconductor demand remains strong. South Korea's financial authorities are considering new measures to rein in extreme stock market volatility. Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chol met with the heads of financial regulators on Wednesday to discuss possible safeguards. One proposal would limit single-stock leveraged ETFs to 20% of an individual investor's portfolio, though no final threshold has been decided. Regulators are also weighing higher financial requirements for brokerage firms to discourage excessive trading, along with a stimulated trading requirement in addition to the current mandatory investor education program. The discussions come after the benchmark stock index tumbled nearly 6% on Wednesday, following an almost 11% plunge the previous trading day. Korea is expecting to face another day of extreme heat today. Daytime temperatures are forecast to reach between 32 and 38 degrees Celsius, with the highest feels-like temperature expected to exceed 38 in parts of Gyeongsang-Namdo province. Across most of the country, feels-like temperatures will rise above 33 degrees and above 35 degrees in many southern areas. Authorities are urging people to avoid outdoor activities and take precautions against heat-related illnesses. Tropical nights when temperatures remain above 25 degrees Celsius are also expected to continue nationwide. The ruling Democratic Party is looking to push through a major judicial reform bill at a plenary session this afternoon. The proposed bill is to amend the Criminal Procedure Act by stripping prosecutors of their authority to conduct supplementary investigations. Instead, the police would be required to carry out additional investigations requested by prosecutors within 1 month, and victims would gain stronger rights to challenge police decisions, a measure aimed at softening the impact of removing prosecutors' investigative powers. However, the main opposition, People Power Party, has vowed to block the bill through a filibuster, arguing that there should be a bipartisan agreement on solutions to safeguard victims and prevent investigative gaps. Alongside this bill, the plenary session is to introduce a special bill that should shorten the parliamentary fast-track review process and a special council bill that investigates the recent local election ballot shortage. Korean rice farming expertise is taking root in the heart of Africa, and with the help of the South Korean government, it could be a game changer for the continent's food security. Our Kim Se-young reports.
Deep in the rainforest of Gabon is an unlikely sight. rice paddies carved out of the jungle. Farmers pump in water, improvise seedling trays from cut plastic bottles, and carefully transplant each seedling by hand, measuring spacing with their fingers. This is Vinayong in Gabon, and what researchers and locals are planning could change everything.
We took over this rice field in May, and we're looking forward to harvesting around September.
The rice itself is a product of decades of Korean agricultural research, but they've been bred to thrive in African soil. Along with 2 other varieties, this rice was officially registered last August as Gabon's first nationally certified rice variety. It's pest-resistant, and by all counts, it tastes good.
We're aiming to secure around 9 tons of seeds of these 3 varieties, and we plan to bring the number of rice farming households up to 1,100 by the end of this year.
Across Africa, rice demand is growing by more than 6% every year. Yet, 21 countries import more than half of what they consume. Over the past decade, South Korea's Rural Development Administration has developed and registered 71 rice varieties across 15 African countries and trained 44 African rice farmers in the process.
This is truly a meaningful initiative, one that lays the foundation for food security and self-sufficiency in Africa.
Korea's farming technology is uniquely reshaping Africa's agricultural future, one rice paddy at a time. Kim Seoyoung, Arirang News.
This is the world now. Wildfires in Greece have killed 3 firefighters. 2 firefighters died after becoming trapped in a blaze on Crete. A third died fighting a separate fire in the Peloponnese region. High winds forced residents and tourists to evacuate nearby villages. In Spain and France, major wildfires have stabilized, letting evacuees return home, though both countries are bracing for a new heat wave this week. FIFA President Gianni Infantino is giving member federations a deadline to accept a plan to sell a stake in the World Cup to private investors. Infantino on Wednesday set a September 19th deadline for federations to accept $20 million each as part of a plan to create a $20 billion FIFA subsidiary, partly owned by private investors. The plan, where the subsidiary would run the World Cup and Club World Cup, is backed by Joshua Kushner, brother of Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. European soccer body UEFA is holding an emergency meeting with its members and says opposition to the plan is, quote, significant and growing. Kenya's Wildlife Service says 15 elephants have died in the Amboseli area near the Tanzanian border over the past month. 10 of the animals showed similar symptoms, including partial paralysis, and died within a day or 2. Kenya's Wildlife Service says there's no evidence of any risk to humans. Preliminary tests detected a potential toxic substance, though officials say more analysis is needed. Irish singer-songwriter Glenn Hansard, who won an Academy Award for the 2007 film Once, has died in a motorcycle crash. Police say the crash happened on the outskirts of Dublin before dawn on Wednesday, and that he was pronounced dead a short time later. Glenn won his Oscar for Falling Slowly, a song he co-wrote with Once co-star Markéta Irglova. Tributes poured in from musicians calling Glenn, quote, a great musician, a good friend, and a generous and gracious man. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
The scorching summer heat is showing no signs of easing. Under strong sunshine, temperatures are soaring once again, and dangerous heat continues across much of the country. Gyeongsangdo provinces are having the toughest summer, with temperatures hovering around 40 degrees Celsius. And even today, Yangsan and Busan will be both climbing to 39 degrees Celsius this afternoon. So if you're spending time outdoors, remember 3 simple heat safety tips. Drink plenty of water, stay in the shade whenever possible, and take frequent breaks. These small steps can help prevent heat-related illnesses. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 34 degrees Celsius, Daegu at 37, Gyeongju 38, and Busan at 39 degrees Celsius. Extreme heat and sunny weather will continue for the next several days. And as we move into August, the heat is expected to become even more intense. So continue taking precautions and stay safe.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.